Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. We made it to the weekend. I'm so ready for a couple days to chill. We're going to jump into part one of today's testimony, but before we do, you know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Music fact of the day, the song Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Will. That song was written as a parody and kind of as a joke about Bob Dylan. The line, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, is a dig at how Bob Dylan would often generalize a group of people by calling them clowns or jokers. Jerry Rafferty was a co-writer on that song. I love Jerry Rafferty. We left off yesterday with Detective Stubbs on the stand from the Rexburg PD. He's a retired detective now. This morning, they introduced body cam of the search warrant. I do have a copy of Lori's right now on my YouTube. It's blown up a bit and you can see a little better. I've got to get the one from Melanie's apartment up there. In Lori's apartment, you see it's messy. There's stuff on the couch, in the kitchen. They found keys that were left, papers. There was an Amazon envelope on the front porch that was addressed to Lori. The pantry had food. They show a half bath. Then they show a door leading to the garage. In the garage, they found couches, tables, bags, and guns. Upstairs, they show the master bedroom had a bed in there. They show the bathroom. The closet was bare, no clothes on the hangers. And the witness says he thinks they left in haste due to the welfare check the day before. Upstairs, there was a desk and they saw dust prints where a computer probably was sitting before it was moved. They did leave a computer up there, and on the computer was a lease agreement for Lori's apartment. They show the hall, the laundry room. There's another room with 2 beds. In the closet, there's coats and fans, a bedspread. There's women's winter clothing in a box. In another bedroom, there were some guitars with guitar cases, a bag of male toiletry items that had cologne in it. In the closet, there were 2 samurai swords and an empty laundry basket. After they moved to 174, which is Melanie's, that one was very quick. It was clear to the witness that somebody was living in there. There was a car in the garage. There were clothes. Even though he didn't testify to this, Melanie's was actually driving down to Arizona to visit Ian's sister for Thanksgiving. In her apartment, they noticed a 3-ring binder on the table, and inside they found several of Brandon's credit cards. They also found an Arizona driver's license belonging to Brandon. That stood out because at this point, they knew Brandon and Melanie's were divorced. They got some warrants on these electronics that they seized. A Verizon warrant was for a known phone number that they had contact with Lori Vallow on, and they got useful information from this warrant. That warrant led to another warrant because when they received the information from the first one, Verizon provided names and emails associated with Lori's number. He goes on to explain, if you're logged on with your Google account, it's a really good way to keep track of where you are and what you're doing. You can opt out of that if you want. There were 4 accounts he focused on. Homer J. Maximus, that's Alex Cox's. They got location data and most of their information from his phone. There was the Lolly Time Forever Gmail account for Lori, and then an iCloud, which was the Lori for Style. For Chad, they did chad.daybell. They got a warrant for the P.O. Box in Sugar City. That's an adjoining town to Rexburg. In that, they found a Verizon wireless bill that had several phone numbers listed for Lori, Alex, Charles, and Tylee. It really just solidified what work they had already done. They were able to eliminate a few of those phone numbers. Also, he noted that account was in default for no payment. If you remember, Charles was paying well over $1,000 a month for the Verizon bill because a lot of her family had their plans on there. So I'm sure Lori did not keep that up. After the search warrant, nobody ever returned to those townhomes. Eventually, the landlords went to clean out and they found 2 abandoned devices and turned those over to law enforcement. They got search warrants for those. One of those belonged to Alex Cox. He said that Verizon would send them live data on where the cell phones were pinging. That's what led them to Lori and Chad in Hawaii. Investigators went over to Hawaii and found the happy couple. They got a search warrant on the residence they were staying in over there as well as their rental car. In the rental car, they found 10 different devices. There was a notebook in the car with accounts and passwords. They got warrants for those accounts. Each search warrant this returned for a phone, it may have thousands and thousands of pages. He had to give some of this to the FBI, some of this to other investigators. They were still looking for the kids at this point, and there was not enough time for just one person to go through these thousands of pages of information. The software that investigators use can fall behind as electronics get updated. You get software updates on your phone. Well, their system had not been updated, so that kept them from getting the passcodes to devices found in Melaniese's apartment. They didn't feel Melanese was being cooperative, so they did get her phone when she was interviewing with Rexburg police. That was early on in 2020. After the kids were found June 9th, 2020, investigators got additional warrants, and they also wanted to bring equipment to Chad's property to gauge cell phone signal strength. Detective Stubbs wanted to see who had spent a lot of times at Chad's house as well as Lori's townhouse on key dates, just to see if there was anybody else they needed to be investigating. They decided to write 12 search warrants for Google. Google didn't respond to those requests, and he said it took a while to talk to an actual human, but their advice to investigators was to shrink that search down a bit. They said that looking for 12 different accounts was too broad, and that's really why they didn't respond to the search warrant. He lessened it by 2, and they ended up getting 10. After the kids were found, they thought it would be a good idea to get a fresh set of eyes on these electronic communications. So a warrant was written for several devices that investigators had already searched through, but they wanted an independent expert just to double check to make sure nothing was being missed. And nothing new was obtained when that second person looked through everything. What are some things they found when they did the search warrants and they were returned? On the Lolly Time Forever Gmail for Lori, there were some search history items that stood out. August 25th, the user was Lori Vallow, and there was a search for wedding rings made of malachite, and also she visited sites for these rings. She did try to purchase 2. One was a size 11 and a half, the other was 4 and a quarter, and the price of that was $808, but her credit card declined and that purchase was never completed. September 20th, she searched definition and meaning of possessed just 3 days before JJ would be buried on Chad's property. September 30th, there was a search for how to remove the back seat from a Jeep Wrangler, and she accessed a YouTube video on how to do that. That is just days before Brandon Boudreaux was shot at. September 8th, Chad Googled the wind direction for the next day, September the 9th. That is the day, as the investigator said, Tylee would be burned and buried on Chad's property. They found a flash drive in a car in Hawaii with photos from Chad and Lori's wedding. When he used the forensic software, it also showed what had been deleted. You wouldn't see this without the law enforcement software. What did they find? A story of photos from the time Chad and Tammy were dating, their marriage, birth of their kids, and beyond had all been deleted off of this drive. The only thing that was left were photos of Lori and Chad's wedding in Hawaii. But he literally erased his life with that thumb drive. Is symbolic to me in a way. The photos, if you're on YouTube, I'm putting those up on the screen right now. We have the ukulele photo that we've all seen. There's one of Chad picking Lori up and kissing her. There is one of Chad and Lori with the minister who married them. They are holding hands, and there is a purple and white lei that's draped across their hands. There's a photo of Lori and Chad in front of the LDS temple in Hawaii, and a photo of them two gazing into each other's eyes. That was it for direct. On cross, Pryor asked him to look at a bunch of photos from the search warrant, but the witness, he was in a different unit when those photos were taken, so he could not testify to those. Pryor asked if the witness felt Lori abandoned the home, and the witness says, I believe in walking through Lori's. The clothes were missing, and it looks like they left in haste. He asked the detective if he saw purchases of tickets to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm that were made prior to your search. He says on the 26th, it was actually the 27th. The witness did not investigate that. But Pryor says you're aware Chad planned this trip 2 weeks before the search warrant. There's an objection that's sustained. And Pryor says, but there's nothing to imply that Chad was vacating his premises. The witness says we weren't searching Chad's home at this time. He brings up the search about the Jeep and asks, are you aware Chad is not criminally implicated in the attempt on Brandon? The witness says yes. And Pryor could not go across without mentioning Melanie Gibb, and here it is. Lori said her friend Melanie Gibb had JJ, and you took effort to get a hold of her. Did you learn they got in touch with her? And the witness says later that evening they did. Pryor says she said she had JJ, and the witness says no, she didn't. Pryor asks if Melanie Gibb lied to law enforcement about having JJ, and the witness doesn't know. And then Pryor says, how do you know she didn't have JJ if you weren't involved in that conversation? And the witness says she said she didn't have him. He brings up Lori said she would be moving in with Melanie Gibb, and her and JJ were at a Frozen movie. And the witness says Lori said they were most likely at a movie. Pryor asks if the witness had any information to support that Lori was looking to permanently move in with Gibb. And the witness says that they were told that by Lori and they did look into it. He says you had information that her friend had JJ, and at some point, Melanie Gibb contacted law enforcement, which concerned you because she didn't have him. With all of the records and information, you didn't look at Melanie Gibb's phone number. The witness says something to the effect of, I haven't as of now, or I haven't yet. And Pryor says, well, we're at trial. When are you planning to? There was an objection that was sustained. Then he asked, you didn't look at David Warwick's phone? No. He asked if he's familiar with the circumstances and who was in close proximity to JJ when he was killed. Pryor says one of those people were Melanie Gibb and the other was David Warwick. And then Lori says, my good friend Melanie has JJ, and you didn't bother to look into Melanie Gibb and David Warwick's phones? And the witness is like, nope. Pryor asked the witness, would you agree? Lori was very convincing, and the witness was like, nope. Pryor says you show up there for 10 minutes and she makes a good number of untruthful statements, and you didn't take action to detain her or any sort of law enforcement action to keep her from fleeing. No. You went back the same day, and again, you didn't take any action. And the witness says at that time they had not established that JJ wasn't with Melanie Gibb and they had nothing to hold her on. He says after you left her apartment, you said not. That's code for telling law enforcement to turn off your body cam so you can't be recorded. And the witness was like, yep. Pryor says, oh, so you didn't want to provide what you and the other officers were going to discuss? And the witness says, we were going to state our opinion. And Pryor says, we don't get the benefit of hearing your opinion. And the witness was like, nope. He asked if they did that with the second video. They did not. He asked if Lori said Alex was her protector. Yes. He also says at this time, there was no search warrant for Chad's property. And then he asked, in all the devices, did you find a message from Chad to Lori saying, hey, let's kill the kids? No. He also talks about the search warrant. And Pryor says, you made a comment going that way, Rob. Who's Rob? And the witness says, prosecutor Rob Wood. Pryor says the prosecution was present for the search and review of Lori's apartment. Did you have any information where Chad was living after his Knott's Berry farm trip? And the witness said he could only speculate. Pryor asked if they tapped anybody's phone calls. And he said, no. A tap is when you listen to someone. We never listen to anybody. He asked if they did a tap and trace on Gibb and David's phone as well. No. Pryor asked if the search warrant to get Chad's phone information was based off the fact that they saw Lori and Chad holding hands at the Hobby Lobby and knew they were married. And there was no indication there was any link to Chad and the disappearance of JJ. The witness says he wasn't responding to us. And Pryor says, you said probably, so you don't know the length or the extent of the attempts that were made to contact Chad. The witness says, I can't give you specifics. Pryor's trying to have his a few good men moment. And he's like, you don't know, do you? There's an objection. And then Pryor says, you don't know, do you? At this point, Judge Boyce jumps in and tells Pryor he needs to let the witness answer. And the witness said attempts were made to get in contact with Chad. Pryor says cell phone coverage shows a phone company has a specific area covered. And Pryor says it's not appropriate to use cell tower information to determine where a device is. The witness said it would really be the least accurate out of the most common ones they use. Pryor asked if it's not unusual to have wedding photos and you don't know if the family photos were copied to another hard drive. He says no. He's asked if he researched why people use malachite, and the witness says something about spirituality and other things. Pryor also asked if there was any information that Chad and Lori had directly discussed getting married, and the witness says not that he knows of. On redirect, you were asked about not doing a search on Gibb and David's phone. Did their phone show up in the geofence? No. Law enforcement didn't do that tap and trace on Melanie Gibb and David Warwick's phone. They asked the witness, when you did a tap and trace on Lori and Chad, was Melanie Gibb cooperating with law enforcement? Yes. They were in communication with her and they knew where she was. You were asked about a link between Chad and JJ. Where was JJ's body found? The witness says on Chad Daybell's property. The prosecution asked, were any of Melanie Gibb and David Warwick's kids found on Chad's property? No. The next witness, FBI Special Agent Steve Daniels. He's on the ERT team. That's the evidence recovery team. He was the senior leader of that team when they did the search warrant for JJ and Tylee at Chad's property. Their role is to handle the forensics for the FBI. He was involved in the search on Chad's property. A week before the search warrant, a local FBI case agent contacted him and said they were going to execute the search warrant at Chad's and they were looking for human remains. They were asked to come up with a search strategy for June 9th and 10th. The search warrant included the home, the outside buildings, and the property. He got to Chad's on June 9th, 2020, just after 7 a.m. After a week of prep, he came there with 8 ERT team members. They all had roles assigned before they got there. There was a photographer, crime scene sign in log. There was a preliminary survey. He did an administrative log. He also did a survey walkthrough of the property once they got there just to get a feel for the location. They had found priority areas during their week of prep. They had aerial and satellite imagery showing the fire pit from the satellite image, as well as pings from Alex's phone. The property was about 3 to 4 acres. They had 2 agents to go find that fire pit and see what kind of condition it was in. They also had that text from Chad to Tammy about the raccoon. They didn't know where the pet cemetery was exactly on the property. I remember Tammy's sister helping them with this. They showed her an overhead photo of the property and she identified where that pet cemetery was. Tammy had showed her one time when she was visiting based on the phone pings on the satellite image of the property, and it showed Alex's location. So they wanted to focus on those 2 areas. Rob Wood has the witness talk about the Faro scanner, which takes a scan. It uses thousands of measurements in the area. They used one of these on the day they found the kids' bodies, and it took 40 360-degree scans over the course of those 2 days. They talk about a total station tool, which is another measuring tool, and it's point to point. He said it's kind of like a surveyor's tripod. The total station is good for measuring great lengths, and a Faro scanner is good for close-up scanning. The first exhibit they show is a basic overview showing where Lori lived in Rexburg, Chad's house, the Walmart, the Salem Church, and then Wireless Revolution LLC. The morning of the search warrant, the teams were staged at that Salem Church. Just a trigger warning, if you are bothered by some graphic details, this is your heads up to click off and we'll see you on Monday. The first photo that you see here is a front view of Chad's house. You see, it looks like a light blue car, silver car in the driveway. You can also see the garage door and the front door. The next photo is a photo that they took from inside Chad's second story bedroom. On this screen, what you see are 2 red arrows. On the left, that is from where this is looking from, and on the right is what you're looking towards. So from this vantage point, if you look just to the corner of the picture behind that police vehicle there, you can see the tree where JJ was buried underneath. Tylee's remains would be in front of this red barn area. You can't see where she is from this view here. The next photo is from the kitchen area. Again, you're looking towards where JJ is buried. The next photo is another view from a bedroom that's on the main part of the house. You have a very clear view of where JJ was buried. And again, Tylee's remains are going to be to the left of the picture where that red barn is. They knew the kids went missing in September of 2019, and now it's June of 2020. They weren't sure if anything had changed with the fire pit, but they did find ash outside of the fire pit, so they made a grid. In the photos here on the screen, you can see that top photo is just the fire pit as they found it. It has some limbs that have leaves on it, and that fire pit is outlined by cinder blocks in a circle. The bottom left photo shows the first layer of the fire pit is removed. They use rakes, shovels, and sifters to start processing the fire pit and look for evidence. From there, they scoop the dirt into buckets and they sift it. In the fire pit, they collected bone fragments, organic material, and they also found a Pura Vida chain. They found that when they were sifting. They also found a piece of cloth and fabric as well. I'm going to put a photo up here of Tylee wearing that necklace that they found. The top left photo is a photo of beautiful Tylee wearing this very necklace. The charm was actually the first piece of evidence that they found, and they stumbled upon it when they were marking off the areas to search. That was just outside of the perimeter of where they were going to excavate. On the right, you see that chain that was found inside the actual fire pit. The bottom photo in the clear plastic bag, that was actually in court today, and the witness looked at it and verified that was what they found in the grass. On the right is a photo of that charm the day they found it, and you can see the little placard there, number 1, that being the first piece of evidence they found. As they processed the scene, the accelerant smell was very strong and it was very overpowering. So they took a soil sample to test that as well. For the rest of this testimony, I'm just going to let some footage from today play. They were getting into the tools that they confiscated. The witness talks about finding a piece of vertebrae. So they had stopped using the backhoe. He could smell the odor of decomposition. They found another bone and then they started excavating with hand tools again. I have from my notes last year, they show another photo of a hole in the dirt and then they show bricks uncovered. They were in the vicinity of where Tylee's body was found. The odor got stronger the more they excavated. They came upon a larger bone, and that let them know they were in the right area. They weren't sure at this point if the remains were human or animal, but they did have a forensic anthropologist on scene who would determine that. He goes through removing Tylee's remains as they come across them. They were identified as human, and they show a close up of her remains on a blue tarp. The burial site was the most difficult due to the dismemberment and just the overall condition of her remains. They show a photo of the burial site at the end of the first day. The remains were put in a body bag and then turned over to the coroner. On the next day, they show an overall photo of Tylee's burial site before they start again. They hit something that they thought was concrete. As they hit the hard area, they realized this is just a mass of remains. Under that was a green bucket and also a partial skull. The investigators were puzzled for a while. They had never seen anything like this. When they tried to lift that out in one piece, it fell apart. The anthropologist in the corner separated remains for inventory of what body parts they had and how many were missing. After they collected all the human remains they could find, they had the backhoe dig deeper and wider just to be sure they got all the remains. They do a Faro scan and it shows the depth of the remains found. Some things were only 1.5 to 2 feet in the ground. They searched the shed in the barn area that day. Inside the barn, they're looking for any tools that could be used in the burial, as well as anything that could be used to dismember or burn remains. They saw a bunch of tools against the wall. They took 4 shovels and a pickaxe. Also, I have in my notes, you see a green bucket against the wall, as well as 2 white buckets. The shovels were dirty and they thought they looked like they could have been used in a fire. They show a close up of the pickaxe and you see material on the pickaxe. There's a close up of 2 dirty shovels with possible ash or something on them. They show photos of a saw, pruning shears, a hacksaw, and several wood saws. There were more tools on the southeast corner of the garage, and they did take some of those. Shovels, 2 pickaxes, a post hole digger, and a hoe were taken as evidence. Bricks on the side of the small shed were collected because they were similar to the ones they found near Tylee's remains. That was essentially it for the day. My thoughts are with the jurors because I know what I saw last year and I know what they saw today. And I'm sure there are going to be plenty of jurors who are going to have a very, very hard time falling asleep tonight. That civic duty is a big sacrifice for the average man and woman who choose not to do this kind of work. So my heart goes out to them and the families and everybody who's had to sit through this week. I'm going to take the weekend off and enjoy my family. Hope you guys have a nice, safe weekend. We'll see you soon.